Welcome to my house. This is the first YouTube I'm doing in English. I've done 5 or 6 in Spanish and been having a lot of fun doing them. And it's such a great way to be able to share whatever things the Lord would have you share. Um, and it gives such great accessibility. It's just, especially for folks in different countries and so on. And I recently, just today, came up with a great inspiration, and that's instead of me doing all of them, I'm going to have friends come in and do some, and I'll for the Spanish people, and I'll interpret for them, and that way I get to, because it's so much fun to introduce friends to friends. That's one of the greatest things, privileges we get to do here on the planet. So today I'm going to kind of recap some things we've been doing at New Day Jacks, and some of you folks haven't been able to be there for some of the services, and so it's really a nice way to be able to play catch up, sort of, and get the whole picture, or if you want to have a rerun. Of course, I can't guarantee this will be exactly like it was in church, but we'll get the basic ideas. Excuse me. So today we're going to start on something it's either taking me 3 or 4 sessions to do, and it's something that is born out of an experience I've been going through, which always make for the best sermons, by the way. And so let's get into it. Just ask the Lord that this might be a blessing for you. It's really been blessing me. So this whole thing started off with a physical challenge I was going through, still am going through, but and it caused me to do some real searching of the Lord, and just to get some answers. It's always a great thing. It takes a while to discover this, but it's always a great thing when we find ourselves in troubled waters, so to speak. Excuse me. And we have to seek the Lord and find that place of peace again. It's just a given that on this, while we're making the journey on this planet, you're going to run into valleys. You're going to run into low places. No matter what kind of mountains you've been on or how much experience you have, you will always run into those places. And what happens, though, is not that those places get eliminated, but our attitudes toward those places gets changed. Our manner of conducting ourselves through those things, and actually our anticipation of what that experience is doing for us, gets changed as we've been through enough. It says it like this in James. It says that you should count it all joy when you fall into tribulation. And we sing songs about that, and we mouth those kind of words really easily, but we all know the moment that it actually becomes a reality. Sometimes we have some problems in the computation department of counting it as joy, and especially I found that it. And let's say this. It goes on then to say, if any of you lack wisdom. Well, I think that part is tied directly to counting it all joy, because the thing that allows us actually to fall into tribulation, fall into rough times, fall into a time of confusion or darkness, the thing that allows us to sincerely count it as joy, to sincerely have some kind of a hopeful joy springing up inside of you, is, and you only get this through experience, I think, and that's when you come to a place where you realize, wow, God's got something great He's going to teach me here. I would not be going through this. And that great thing, it really is called wisdom. And so when we fall into diverse trials and so on, there's wisdom at the end of that. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's God's light. So I found myself in that place, and I had shared with somebody this very thing, that you need to count it all joy. And then I found myself in it, and fortunately, my downtime is getting less and less, seemingly, where because we get caught up in the the wind and the waves of our situation, sometimes it takes us a while to remember, oh yeah, there's some great thing God's getting ready to give me here. This is the introduction to a great thing. And so I found myself in that situation, and what we're going to be talking about in these couple of sessions is what God gave me through that. And I'm just going to start reading, as I did when we did this in church, read this little section out of the Gospel of Matthew at 17:22. And it says, as they were regrouping in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed to some people who want nothing to do with God. They will murder him, and 3 days later he will be raised alive. The disciples felt terrible. When they arrived at Capernaum, the taxmen came to Peter and asked, does your teacher pay taxes? Peter said, of course. But as soon as they were in the house, Jesus confronted him. Simon, what do you think? When a king levies taxes, who pays? His children or his subjects? He answered, his subjects. Jesus said, then the children get off free, right? But so we don't upset them needlessly. Go down to the lake, cast a hook, and pull in the first fish that bites. Open its mouth, you will find a coin. Take it and give it to the taxmen. It will be enough for both of us. That is such a crazy story, isn't it? Not only is there evidently a miracle involved there, there's this word of knowledge on both ends of it, where Jesus knew by a word of knowledge what had gone on with Peter and the IRS, but then he also knows by a word of knowledge how that need is going to be met. And it's just such a crazy story. I mean, why didn't Jesus just reach behind Peter's ear and pull out a coin? No, he hasn't. He takes Peter down into a venue that Peter himself was familiar with, and in all his years of fishing, I am sure, he never pulled up a fish with a coin in its mouth, especially on demand. And I can't help but thinking that it was kind of Jesus' sense of humor, because he did have one, and sort of saying, Peter, you just let some garbage out of your mouth because you didn't even bother to talk to me about it before you spoke for me, my little lawyer, Peter, thank you. But don't worry, because when I've fully caught you, I'm going to bring treasures out of your mouth, which he most certainly did. So, that being said, I think I was talking with a friend of mine this morning about that. I think we have felt obligated to defend Jesus sometimes in front of people. And the problem with that is we end up speaking out of school there. It's very easy to do that. It's very easy to end up in our zeal to protect Jesus. It couldn't have anything to do with the fact that I am associated with him. We can end up speaking out of place and saying things that maybe Jesus himself would not have us saying. Maybe in the spirit of what is in spirit and in truth. Another word there would be honesty. There are probably things that we should not be saying, or at least we should be checking them out with him before we say them. And I think I've found myself doing that in my zeal to present the right picture of Jesus, present a picture that everybody's going to want. I Photoshop it so much that pretty soon people are looking at it going, I think that's been Photoshopped. Whereas, God did not bother to Photoshop his son before he came here. It says he came and there was nothing in him that we should desire. Man, we would have been tweaking all sorts of things about him to make him look better. I'm pretty convinced of that. So anyway, this what we're going to get into here has much to do with that, because here's the reason. I think, and we're going to speak a lot about healing and miracles and this God we serve, because I think that's an area where we have done some photoshopping. And here's the deal. I got into this because I had preached healing a lot. I'm thoroughly convinced in healing. In fact, let me just say, I had an experience when I was born again. The night I was born again, I had an experience in which God showed me that He was healer, and I didn't know anything about healing. I was just a hippie recently off of drugs, and could have cared less about any kind of religion or any kind of denominational beliefs or credences. And just sovereignly one night, I won't take the time, but God showed me He was a healer. So I've never questioned that since then. That was part of His job description. But then later, of course, I got mixed up in denominations that really trumpet that and make that the kind of the centerpiece of the gospel. And I found that very appealing because I already had a conviction about that, and have a history of trying to walk things out by faith and having God heal me and so on. And when I ran into this recent challenge, I just couldn't get a peace about taking the path of healing as I had conceived of it up until that time. I just couldn't come up with a peace, and it's been going on a year, and I've been trying to find a word. There's just something about when the Word of God comes to your life. It's a transformational. It changes the whole scene. The stage may be the same, but the whole scene and act change when that word comes. The whole atmosphere changes when that word comes. And I was having a rough time hearing that word, whether it was a word of faith that would just allow me to walk past that challenge to my life, or if it was a word of where to go to a doctor, what kind of medicine something. I needed something that would be the real deal for me. And I'm sure some of you have been through that. Maybe you're going through it now. My understanding up until recently was the highest way is get healed supernaturally by God. That was, I never quite said it like that, but it was kind of my qualification, levels of qualification. And the best healing of all was a miraculous Kazam healing. Now you aren't, now you are. That was like the spiritual thing to have happen to you. Next was maybe you just walk that thing out day by faith, and whatever happened, nonetheless, here you are today, and you're here, you're still with us, and God kept you, and you're healed. And at the bottom of the rung would be going to a doctor and getting medicine, and yet that's highly preferable to you leaving us. So that was just kind of my mentality, and it's always hard to admit some of these things, but I realized a long time ago that if I want to be a leader of God's people, I have to be an example to God's people, and an example is that it's that problem that gets its solution worked out before you go on to all the other problems. So that means I get to be the example. You get to watch my problem being worked out. Hopefully that when you come to your problem, it will help you some. That's what examples are. Remember that in math, don't you? So that being said, I really the thing I was facing, just it all kind of climaxed in a certain one evening out on our porch out there, and I'm just sitting out there quiet and alone, and I'm just saying, God, I don't get it. I'm not. Why? What's happening here? And really, it reached a point of desperation. I call it desperation. I think God said, "Oh, He's finally listening." And at that point, the Lord began to download some things into me. And I'll talk about those a little bit later, more specifically. But it got me thinking, and I began to. Well, I'll just say right off. He asked me. He said, "How many miracles, the things I call miracles, have you seen in your body?" And it caught me off guard. And we tend to forget things, both good and bad, and that's probably a blessing and a curse. But I went back through my history trying to think, and when he said miracles like what I call miracles, and I knew that meant things which totally defied the laws of physics. My father being a physicist, those things are, we were raised with those laws being very important. And things that totally defy and are unexplainable through natural laws, that would be a miracle. My mind ran past my history and so I could think of other people that I had actually been present when I saw a couple of those things happen. But as far as me, myself, having one of those things, I have a couple of experiences that I'm just not sure about. I can't really say, and there's no way to go back and figure that one out. But an overwhelming one, no, I couldn't say that I had. And the Lord just so clearly said, thank you for being honest. And at that moment, I realized, wow, this is going to be interesting. And I felt like the Lord said, I think most of us would like to see more and more. It's just fun to hang around when God's doing supernatural stuff. I've been in those situations. And but our batting average for answered prayer in those areas is pretty low. There'd be no Major League Baseball contract for us as Christians with that kind of a batting average. It's just low. I don't think, probably, there's no way of knowing this, but if somehow you could put a USB in heaven's hard drive to find out how many prayers of his people get answered in the way they were expecting, it'd be a pretty low percentage, I'm guessing. Who knows? I can just speak for my own. There's a lot of prayers I've thrown up there, and I certainly don't have the certainty of every one of them being answered. And there's some great things to learn in all of that. But my goal here would be that get better. Because if it isn't, then it's just an indication of us being talk, but not a whole lot of results. And that's something the church is trying to live down and needs to be lived down. So I don't believe we're being meddling or just looking for trouble if we examine. I don't think we're being critical. If we examine our success rate or lack of it in an endeavor to let the truth shine and thereby up our batting average. What's wrong with that? I think it's a great idea. I think it's something we should have been doing long ago. Not that people have not gone into these things, they have. So anyway, there's where we're coming from. I'd like to see a better batting average personally and on the part of those I know, and as on the part of the church as a whole. It brings about a greater testimony to who he is. It'd be a truer testimony. So obviously, there's some things we need to learn. There's some things we have not understood. I think healing in itself has been one of the things I have queried about over years, over decades, wondering knowing in me that there's parts of this we're not getting. There's just parts of this we're not getting. And we always have to end up, when we've got a great prayer campaign going for somebody's healing and they die, we have to end up retreating and trying to recoup and then bravely and valiantly do something that says, I'm not giving up on this. And that's fine and good, but I don't think that's the way God would have us live, really. I think he really wants to, as he said, lead us into all truth. It's so great when you can speak from the truth. Oh, it's wonderful. The truth is just marvelous. It so sets us free. So here we go. We're going to examine what we're headed toward is trying to discover some deeper truths about these things deeper, I say, but just things that we haven't maybe focused on, that will give us a greater security. And I think that in the end of the matter, though we're going to be critical in a scientific sort of way, we're going to look analytically at some of these things. The goal is that we end up doing better, and His name gets more glory. It's just all there is to it. So, that being said, hopefully we won't have to be like Jesus' little lawyers so much, and opening our mouths and vouching for Him in maybe ways He doesn't even want us doing. Jesus had something to teach Peter there. So, we're going to be talking over this whole theme of gifts and blessings, and discuss the reasons for the frequency of answers or the lack of frequency of answers. And there's two things I think we have to be willing to do as we go through in this. And one is a personal transparency. Who gets anywhere in God until you admit where you are? And secondly, I think we might have to reclaim some vocabulary, because we've been pretty liberal with the way we just throw words around, and it's not like God is the great English teacher in the sky, or whatever your language happens to be, but he's not a grammarian in that sense. But when we, over time especially, it's so easy to sap the true significance of a word away from it, and that word ends up kind of being a shelter to a whole lot of concepts that originally it was not meant to include. And so I think we're going to have to reclaim some vocabulary and begin to use it in the way heaven uses it, and conceives and thinks of it. Here's an example. We have many of us have championed for years, the concept of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and I'm sure any of you probably watching this, you would say, I have the baptism, and really there is no such animal in the Scripture called the baptism of the Holy Spirit, like it's a single event that can take place in our lives, and it's a timeline event. Before then I did not have the baptism. Boom, I have the baptism. From then on I've got it. Do you have it? And that's just totally out to lunch as far as the way the Scripture teaches that, because it doesn't teach about a single event. You can do the same thing with the coming of the Lord, that the kind of words that get thrown around, the second coming, that thing does not exist. And maybe we even have a proper understanding of it, but if we insist on using incorrect vocabulary, it's only a matter of time before those who don't have a proper understanding of it begin to use that vocabulary in ways that can even become detrimental. And so it's important. It is important that we get our terms straight, so that when we're speaking about what God is doing and things, the desires of His heart, we're correctly expressing what those things would be. So we had a little example when I was sharing this in church. And it was our good friend Diana was sharing how their car began, on a long trip they were on, their car began to act up and cause some problems, and they knew they were just trusting God to get them home. And after several hundred miles of driving, the alternator chose to give up just as they glided to a stop in front of their house. And of course, you immediately think of all the places it could have decided to do that before that moment. And it would be nice to say it was just a miracle. Well, it was incredible. It was wonderful. I choose that word instead, full of wonder. And as somebody said in the time together, favor. These things, it was not a miracle, because no laws of physics that we know of were superseded. No natural law was sidestepped and annulled for a few minutes while God saved them from a lot of hassles. But was it a wonderful thing? Could it have been inspired from heaven? Could it have been engineered through angelic tweaking? Most definitely. Most definitely. Was it God blowing them a kiss? Certainly. But it just didn't come down in a miracle way. And sounds nitpicky, but for things we're going to get into later, not really. So that's just kind of an idea. So to get into the things I feel like the Lord's been showing me, we kind of have to do one of those. We have to search ourselves out in the biblical scheme of things and find the "you are here" little X. You know how when you go to like a big mall or something and you're looking for a store and there's so many of them and you don't even know where to start. In order to start, you have to find the "you are here" on the big board there before you even have a chance of orienting yourself. And so we kind of need to do that as well. So we're going to talk about creation. And when I say creation, I'm talking about the whole thing, the whole cosmos that God made, and I'm talking about that little piece of it that you were personally present for in time and space. My creation right now is my living room and my air book and the notes I have in my hands, the good tea that I'm drinking, and this is my creation right now. This is the part of creation I am interacting with, and yet it includes the whole. And there's some things that I think we need to do the "you are here" thing. We need to go back to the beginning because creation is broken up into two sections here, and it's Genesis 1 and 2, which we call normal. Genesis 1 and 2, life was normal. And from Genesis 3 to almost the end of Revelation, life is abnormal. And though that second part seemingly occupies so much more time, in the broader scope of what the Bible would call age without end, that second part is just a blink. And it's abnormal. The things that are going on, the history that is recounted, most of the teaching that are given is all oriented toward an abnormal situation with the desire to bring it back into normality and beyond. So we need to know what normal was first. When we're talking about a miracle, we're talking about something that's is a drastic measure to pull us out of abnormality. So we'll just spend the rest of this first time here looking at normal a little bit. And I think we probably have not, I know, we have not grasped the awesome thing that God did in those first two chapters. We've been exposed to it so much from Sunday school on and Golden Book pictures and all those kind of things that we've probably not captured even a glimpse of the glory and the wonder that was present in the creation and in the act of the creator. And so we need to get a little bit of that, or we have no hope really of understanding the abnormality that followed and how to correct that abnormality. We've got to know where we started from. And so there's a picture that I really enjoy in the scripture, and it's in the book of Nehemiah. I love that book. And I think it gives us a little bite-sized allegory of the grandeur of this thing that was called creation that was lost. Not really lost, but covered over. And it comes down to this little allegorical picture in the book of Nehemiah, where Nehemiah, if you will remember, his job was he was the cupbearer for the king, and as far as I know, he seemed like a fairly prosperous, happy cupbearer and was doing well with that when suddenly God interrupted his life Ooh, for divine interruptions. And in that interruption, it came in the form of a deep, profound grief and burden for his homeland. I don't think he expected it to come. I don't think it was. I think it was nothing more than a surprise to him, and it wasn't. It did not come with the announcement, "Hi, I'm your godly calling for the rest of your life. Good to meet you." No, it just took place. Something took place in his heart when he heard of the desperate situation, and it birthed a calling. It called forth the deepest part of his being and the true identity of who this man was. And we know the story how it was irrepressible even before the king. He could not hold this thing in, and actually it's the queen who picked up on it because the ladies are always more attentive and sensitive. And Nehemiah ends up going on this call, this journey, this quest, with the anticipation of rescuing and raising up Jerusalem once again. He has no clue about, I don't think he has any clue, never been to the land as far as we know. It was just all hearsay. But he's got an imagination like all of us do, and I'm sure he had some kind of, it would be, I'll plan on setting aside some time in heaven to sit down with him and hear how his imagination compares out with what he found when he got there. Oh boy, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because when he gets to Jerusalem, of course, what he finds is an utter disaster. It's ground zero. It is, to the untrained eye, there was nothing there except what the Bible calls rubble. Now, see, he's kind of like the first archaeologist because he is trying to discover some deep secret from the past. And because in that secret, there is intertwined into that secret both his and his people's, their true identities, their true reason for being here on earth. But it's been buried, and buried good. And so he arrives in Jerusalem, which was just a pile of rubble, as we said, and he's got to have an eye, first of all, to see that glory is there. And secondly, to be able to uncover it and rebuild it. Bring it back to life. Bring it back to light. Quite a challenge. Most people would not even see or believe that such a thing still lay there. But you see, that ground is the ground where at one point in time, through the instrumentation of David and carried on by Solomon, where God's finger came down and touched earth. And the result of that was blessing and glory beyond anything that had ever been seen from the end of normal on. We get a little tiny picture of the picture when the Ark of God was stationed at the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, I think it was. And it just said, and God blessed the house of Obed-Edom. It does not tell us how or what the manifestations were, but obviously it came in some kind of a form that was observable, because the rumor got back to David. Man, Obed-Edom's house is being blessed. His family is being blessed. His cows are being blessed. His garden is being blessed. It's just, it's crazy what's happening there. It's just wild. And it was so obvious that it rekindled the desire of David to figure out how to get that ark home. And it was the glory and the blessing that did that. I don't know if his cows suddenly went from 2 gallons of milk to 10 gallons a day or what, I don't know. But something made it terribly obvious that the blessing of God had come. And that was just in a household. And this was actually the presence of God coming down, landing on a city in a temple that he hadn't even asked for, and bringing such a glory upon earth. Historically, I don't think it's ever been duplicated. And so there was it was so observable again that now you just don't have rumors coming back to David. Now you have the greatest men and women of the world setting aside months of their precious vacation time to come and see. It got very close to Isaiah 2, where it says the people said, "Let us go up." And people were saying, Solomon did not have to send out brochures about vacation packages to Jerusalem and guided tours, and that people were saying of themselves, "I've got to see this. If the rumors are half of what they told me, I've got to see it." Well, it switched, because when they came and saw it, they said, "Well, they didn't tell me half." Not even half. The glory here is, people, world leaders said, "I would rather, if given my druthers, I would rather be here a servant in the midst of this than king in my own country." The glory was of such a measure. It said silver was, they quit counting silver, quit counting the change. There was so much of it. The abundance, it said that, there was an analogy given to it, that the glory of God was so common that it's like they approached normal again. They were approaching normal. Well, then that was lost. And not only lost, it got buried in the place of that great thing. God, we look at someplace like Stonehenge and we say, "Wow, this did not just happen by accident. There was purpose behind this. This obviously was a place that carried great meaning and significance at some time, and nobody's really been able to understand what that was, but it was obvious it was so." And so it is with it was with Jerusalem. There was purpose, there was direction, there was a clarity that had never been seen before since normal on. But all of that, I think, was just a picture of the glory of God that was in his creation before it was lost, before it got blotted out and covered over with our garbage. There was the glory of Jerusalem could not hold a candle to the glory of Eden. We can't even get our brains to go to a place of having no needs. I can't make my heart get into a no-need place. I've been pelted with needs so much all my life that I don't know how to live without that. And maybe you're different, but I doubt it. Because we live in a needy world. We live in a world that screams need 24/7 at us. And in Eden, there was no need. There was no lack. There was nothing you could dream about attaining, because anything you wanted was there. So, that glory having been lost, we also lost the ability to make rhyme and reason of this whole creation. Somebody was pointing out to me recently that it says that for God so loved the world, and the word for world there is cosmos, and that means the orderly arrangement of the way he made things. He was really content with the way he made things. And we'll just point out a couple things from creation, then we'll finish this time. But I like the way the scripture in Genesis goes in Spanish in this one verse, because we have it in English as, "And he did this and thus on the sixth day, and God looked at all that he had done, and it was very good." And in Spanish it says "en gran manera," which means in a great manner good. This was a fantastic thing. It was fantastic. Nothing that we have this side from abnormality on can compare with it. Nothing. The greatest of things cannot compare with the great manner of good that this creation was when there was not yet a bit of rubble on top of it. The creation reflected the Creator. That's why it was so good. And that's why God, the quality that God kept picking out, it is that it was good. Why? Because it was a reflection of a good creator. It also had this wonderful thing that is in God, and it's because I think God, in a sense, imparted His DNA to it, and it's that it keeps, and it said everything brought forth after its kind. In other words, it was not a stagnant, um, just a solitary existing thing that had no life essence in itself. There was the ability to multiply and bring forth after your kind. There was a dynamic there um, that is still there because God's like that. So, and we're going to hit this more because we tend to look at creation as this still life out there. And it's not. It has a momentum. It has a direction. It has a purpose. It has a dynamic. It's like it has its own life. You know, I realize this is probably highly symbolic when Jesus said it, but I think there's a little more there when He says, if these were to be quiet, the rocks themselves would have to cry out. I don't think that was just all symbolism. I think He was saying there is something alive in creation in itself that responds to the right stimuli. We get the idea of the fact that the plurality of God comes in that beginning, shows us the plurality of Him, and it shows us that that authority is para. I'm sorry, dropping into Spanish there, is for serving. It talks about the sun and the moon and the majesty and the glory they had to serve creation in denoting times and seasons and so on. There's all sorts of great concepts that come alive to us as we read that creation, that it has a direction, it has a purpose. And we'll stop with this, but basically what we're going to see is that there is so much of our lives that are determined by how we relate with this creation that God has not only made us a part of and put us into, but He's actually called us to be stewards of the thing, which implies we should have a really good working knowledge of it. And I don't think we have. And so we're going to find that the more we cooperate with His, and please, we're not going New Age here, we'll explain all these things, but the more we cooperate with the way God set up the creation that we are a part of and actually meant to steward over, the more blessing comes upon our lives. And the more we go against it, the more we try to swim upstream from and go counter to its purposes, it releases us into a life that I like to call relentless resistance. We've all met people, it seems like their lives are just one drama after another. And we all get a little drama now and then in our lives, but it's the continuing drama. It's the 10th season of the serial and the saga that's disturbing. And so we're going to see that a lot of that has to do with how we understand how God set up creation. When you go on the airplane, you know, they tell you we do not anticipate the loss of cabin pressure, but in the event that we should lose cabin pressure, and then they tell you about the oxygen mask, they tell you about the lifeboats under the seat, they tell you about how to inflate the life vests. And if it was the first time on a plane and you did not understand or hear the little introduction about in the event that, though we don't anticipate, you could get the idea that this is what's going to happen on this flight. When do the emergency lights go on? When does the mask drop on? So it's important to understand from the beginning our journey and how things fit together from there. Okay, so that'll be the end of this one, and then when I get around to it, we'll do part 2 and hopefully part 3 of this, and just get into, I think, some really liberating truths. So God bless you, and we'll be back.